The Siege of Eger in 1552 stands as one of the most remarkable examples of human resilience and ingenuity in European history, a clash not only of armies but of determination against overwhelming odds, where a few thousand defenders, villagers, and craftsmen faced an Ottoman force of 40,000 elite soldiers armed with heavy artillery capable of pulverizing stone walls, a force so large and well-coordinated that every strategic and logistical preparation pointed to an inevitable collapse. Yet, within the walls of that small Hungarian fortress, determination, organization, and innovation converged to create a resistance that would astonish contemporaries and echo through history. To understand the full significance of Eger, one must first imagine Hungary in the decades before the siege, a land fractured after the catastrophic defeat at Mohacs, where the king had fallen, nobles had fled, and the country had become a patchwork of Ottoman-controlled territories, Habsburg-loyal regions, and borderlands where villages simply tried to survive amidst the shadow of war, a land where the proud names of fortresses like Buda, Veszprém, and Skolnsvar, once symbols of strength, had come to signify retreat and loss, where every year brought a shrinking frontier, and the crescent banners of the Ottoman Empire crept further north, bringing with them the threat of destruction to towns, mines, and lives. And in this context, Eger, a small hilltop fortress guarding the approach to the rich northern silver mines, suddenly became the focus of imperial ambition and desperate defense, a place too modest for most foreign generals to even pronounce but crucial in the broader contest for control of Hungary and, by extension, the influence of the Habsburgs in Central Europe. When the Ottoman commanders Ahmed Pasha and Ali Pasha began to assemble their army, it was not merely an army that moved north, it was a traveling state of war, tens of thousands of infantry and cavalry engineers, blacksmiths, siege masters, supply wagons, and beasts of burden, moving with a precision born of decades of conquest, artillery teams preparing cannons designed to shatter walls and instill terror, soldiers drilled to the point where even exhaustion became a managed variable, and a meticulous plan for siege warfare that assumed Eger would fall in days rather than weeks. And yet, behind the modest walls of the fortress, István Dobó, a commander known for his composure and methodical approach, took stock of every weakness, evaluating battlements, gates, wells, ammunition, and choke points, organizing defenders into rotations, reinforcing walls with masons and carpenters, coordinating civilian efforts to store food, water, and medical supplies, training soldiers and creating fallback positions, while young Gerhard Bornemisza, a brilliant inventor and technician, began designing explosive devices, fire pots, and primitive grenades that could amplify the defenders' limited numbers, ensuring that each corner of the fortress could serve as a trap for the approaching Ottoman forces. And as scouts reported the approach of a massive army across the plains, Eger transformed from a small, quiet stronghold into a fortress alive with purpose, tension, and anticipation. The townspeople understanding the stakes not only for themselves but for the mines, the roads, and the entire northern frontier, the knowledge of vulnerability driving an unprecedented unity of effort. When the Ottoman army finally appeared, stretching across the valley in organized columns, tents rising in neat clusters, artillery teams leveling guns, engineers plotting trenches and forward batteries, cavalry scouting the perimeter, the defenders watched the disciplined spectacle with a mixture of fear, awe, and grim determination, knowing that their survival depended not on matching the enemy in brute strength but on exploiting ingenuity, terrain, and coordination. And when the first cannonballs struck the walls, shaking stone and dust from the rafters, every individual in Eger understood that the coming days would test endurance, courage, and strategy to their limits. Yet the response was immediate. Small cannons fired on the enemy, muskets and bows rained down from battlements, stones and boiling water met ladders and scaling attempts, and Bornemisza's firepots, barrels of flammable mixtures, and clay spheres erupted unpredictably among the advancing infantry, creating confusion, breaking formations, and buying precious moments for defenders to regroup, reinforce, and counterattack. And as the bombardment continued, with each day bringing new cracks, partial collapses, and the near exhaustion of manpower and resources, the defenders adapted, filling gaps with timber, sandbags, and earth, rotating exhausted soldiers, repairing armor and weapons, and refining Bornemisza's inventions to counter each new tactic. each scaling attempt, each forward trench dug by the Ottomans, while the enemy commanders, accustomed to swift victories, found their advance slowed, staggered, and, on occasion, temporarily halted by unpredictable resistance and small but devastating explosions from the fortress walls. And when the southern wall finally gave way after days of concentrated cannon fire, opening a breach wide enough for multiple attackers, the defenders' response was immediate and coordinated, civilians and soldiers forming barricades, spears and muskets meeting the first waves of infantry, firepots igniting among enemy ranks, arrows raining down, and a surge of desperate courage driving attackers back even as stones and rubble fell around both sides, the chaos magnified by a sudden wind that blew Ottoman smoke and gunpowder fumes back into their own lines, further disorienting them, a moment of nature becoming a decisive factor in the survival of a fortress and its people. And in that moment, the siege shifted from a slow test of endurance to a battle of nerve, ingenuity, and improvisation, a combination of disciplined leadership under Dobó, inventive lethality under Bornemissa, and collective effort from every man, woman, and child in Eger that created a force multiplier far beyond what numbers alone would suggest, forcing seasoned soldiers to retreat, reconsider, and ultimately abandon their plans for immediate conquest. And as night fell and the enemy began to withdraw, Eger's defenders, exhausted, injured, and weary, understood the significance of what they had achieved: not a glorious victory in open battle, not a crushing defeat of a great army, but the preservation of a fortress, a community, and a strategic point whose continued existence prevented further Ottoman advancement into northern Hungary, protecting mines, villages, and supply lines essential to the Habsburgs. And in the aftermath, the siege became more than a military engagement. It became a symbol of resistance, ingenuity, and the power of ordinary people united under extraordinary circumstances, demonstrating that leadership, courage, and adaptive thinking could defy expectations, and that even a small garrison could influence the broader course of events in a region overshadowed by empire, leaving an enduring legacy that would inspire future generations to understand that in war, as in life, determination, preparation, and cleverness often outweigh sheer force, and that the human spirit, when organized, coordinated, and motivated by shared purpose, can endure pressures that seem impossible, hold ground against the mightiest armies, and survive moments that appear destined for collapse. And thus the story of Eger in 1552 remains etched in European history, a testament not only to the tactical and technical skill of its defenders but to their ability to withstand fear, exhaustion, and overwhelming power, to innovate under fire, to act decisively in the face of uncertainty, and to maintain cohesion where collapse seemed inevitable, proving that even in the shadow of one of history's greatest empires, courage, ingenuity, and unity could carve a narrow path to survival, transforming a small fortress on a hill into a legend that transcended its size, location, and immediate strategic significance. And even today, the Siege of Eger serves as a reminder that in the struggle between preparation and brute force, in the confrontation between overwhelming expectation and human will, resilience, leadership, and creative problem-solving can alter outcomes in ways that history would remember, showing that victory is not always about strength, numbers, or technology alone, but often about the unyielding determination of those who refuse to surrender, the quiet genius of those who invent under pressure, and the solidarity of communities facing what seems like certain destruction. And in the story of Eger, every element of human endurance and resourcefulness, the soldier's discipline, the civilian's labor, Dobó's calm command, Bornemissa's inventive skill, the timing of the wind, the strategic use of terrain, and the refusal to abandon hope, coalesced into an event that was not only a siege but a living demonstration of how history can be shaped by a combination of courage, intellect, and sheer will, a narrative that reminds us that even the smallest fortress, manned by the few and facing the many, can withstand the tide of empire when every defender understands the stakes, acts with unity, and leverages every advantage offered by skill, invention, and circumstance. And so the walls of Eger still stand in memory, cracked but unbroken, a monument to the power of determination, the creativity of humankind under duress, and the lesson that even when all odds seem stacked, endurance, ingenuity, and courage can tilt the balance, echoing through centuries as a story of hope, defiance, and the extraordinary capacity of people to change the course of events when united by purpose. And it is in this blend of strategy, innovation, leadership, and collective resolve that the true essence of Eger's legendary stand resides, reminding us that even in the darkest hours, the human spirit, armed with preparation, creativity, and courage, can hold, can endure, and can inspire, transforming a siege into a story that transcends time, geography, and the immediate stakes of battle, leaving behind not just a fortress, but an enduring lesson about the intersection of human will, tactical genius, and the indomitable determination to survive against all odds, a lesson that continues to resonate whenever courage is measured against might, innovation against brute force, and unity against overwhelming pressure.